7. Balkot Darusun Kot Josoran Kando Tom Sakiri Naru Tracin Kad Vodi En and glory, eternal glory. We shall bear its right together. Forged like the saber in the fires of death. Brothers all. Traditional Mandalorian war chant. It would have been much easier to fight in a different environment. Nana decided that when he got back to base, he'd ask to amend the training manual on Noroban warfare to reflect the fact that SOPs for temperature rural terrain were definitely not interchangeable with jungle tactics. It was the fields. There was too much open ground between areas of cover. Nana had been sitting in the fork of a tree for so long that one buttock was numb and the other was catching up fast. And still, the group of militia was sprawled in the grass at the edge of a recently mown field, passing around bottles of Urquell. Nana didn't stir under his camouflage of leaves. It was nearly autumn, so it was a trick they wouldn't be able to rely on much longer, as almost all the woodland was deciduous. They planned to pull out long before then. Anything happening, Sarge? Fi's voice was a whisper in his helmet. Even though the sound wouldn't carry, it was a smart habit, just in case. If one precaution was good, two was better. Still strigging. Yeah, we could always wait until they die of liver failure. Save the ammo. You okay? My bladder's a bit full, but find other eyes. I finished shredding that Speedy's onboard computer. I hope he's doing it quietly. He moved into the wood a bit. He reckons he's downloaded some high-res charts, but the rest are probably fried. He's on the encryption files now. As long as he's happy. Vi made a stifled snort of laughter. Yeah, he's happy. I've been Darman. Nana still had no idea what Atin had meant by that. He'd remember to ask him at a more appropriate moment. All he wanted right then was for Hoken's men to get up and move on, so they could cross over to RV Beta, just 4 clicks ahead. It would have been easy to pick them off, and the squad had left too many already. Pick them off from here. But that would leave a nice pile of calling cards, and the squad had left too many already. Nana wanted to avoid all the hard contact that he could. They have to run out of Urquell soon, and they can't be taking Gez Hoken very seriously. Nana was watching the group through his rifle scope, wondering why there was a preponderance of weak rays when they all looked up, but not at him. They were looking to his right. 5 more targets approaching, Fi said. Nana tracked right very gently. Got him. They didn't look like militia. There was an Baron very smart in a pale grey uniform that matched his skin and 4 battle droids marching behind him. Some of the militia boys got to their feet. One of them, reclining on the ground, held his bar out in an offering, muttering something about curing rust. The only words of conversation that Nino could pick up from the Baron were, Hawkins asked, "Any contact?" The breeze took the rest. "They've got reinforcements," he thought. "They look like a different problem altogether." And they were. But not for him this time. The reinforcement droids raised their integral blasters without warning and simply opened fire into the group of militia. They fired a few bolts in an orderly manner, and then waited, looking down at their victims, as if checking. The Umbaran commissioned officer or sergeant stepped forward and fired another blast at close range into a recray. Apparently satisfied that their job was done, they gathered up the group's assortment of blasters and sidearms, searched the bodies for something, ID, Nina suspected, and marched calmly away, back down their approach route. Nina heard Fies exhale at the same time he did. "Well," Fies said, "you can empty your bladder now, I suppose." Nina slid down from the fork of the tree, and his leg buckled under him. He removed the plates and rubbed his thighs to get the circulation going. "What do you reckon that was all about, then?" "Hoken doesn't like them drinking on duty." At him appeared a jumble of circuitry and wires in one hand. "Looks like the Teenies have shown up to take over. But why shoot them?" "Teenies," Fi said. "What did your squad call them?" "Droids." Nina nudged Fi. "General Zay said Hoken was violent and unpredictable. He executes his own people in cold blood. Let's remember that." They gathered up their gear, and this time it was the turn of Atin and Nina to carry the load they'd rigged underslung on a pole. Fi walked ahead on point. "I haven't fired a shot yet," he said. "On this short of a mission, the fewer the better," Atin said. Nina took it as a sign that Atin was joining in. His tone wasn't as defensive. Regular people said they couldn't tell the difference between one clone and another, did they? That was what came of spending too much time looking at faces and not enough wondering what shaped people and went on inside their heads. "Save him from later," Nina said. "I think we are going to need every single round." "I must be out of my mind." Etain watched the ramshackle farmhouse buildings through a gap in the barn's planked walls. The roofs were outlined against the deepening turquoise of the dusk sky. Two lamps stood by the porch of the main building to keep the Gadans away from the path to the outside refresher. There were so many of the little predators nesting around the farm that one of their warrens had subsided, leaving a gaping hole in the farmyard that was now filling up every time it rained, but Hans wasn't big on maintenance. That did make some tasks easier, though. Satisfied that nobody was approaching, She went back to working boards loose from the bond's frame at the rear of the building. There was no other exit if she were ambushed, so she was making one. She concentrated on the boards, fixing their shape and position in her mind. Then she visualized them, separating and moving aside, creating a gap. Move, she thought. Just parts swing aside. And the boards did indeed move. She rehearsed shifting them with a force a few times, letting them fall back into place quietly. Yes, she could use the force. When she felt confident and controlled, she could master everything Folia had taught her, but those days could be few and far between. She wrestled with a temper unbefitting a Jedi. She watched those with serene acceptance of the Force and envied their certainty. She wondered why Jedi blood had bothered to manifest itself in someone who was so fallible. Etain hoped she could manage to use the Force to do something more momentous than moving planks if the situation demanded it. She was certain that the next few days would test her beyond her limits. Janot arrived just after it grew completely dark. Despite watching intensely through the crack in the wall, lightsaber ready, Etain didn't see her approach, or even hear her until the door swung open. But she felt her, and she wondered why she hadn't felt her before. "Ready, girl?" Janot asked. She was wrapped in a filthy shawl that seemed about to walk of its own accord. It was a pretty convincing disguise. "Why didn't you tell me?" Etain asked. "Tell you what?" Janot asked. "I might be less than the ideal Padawan, but I can always sense another Jedi. I want to know why." "You're wrong. I'm not that at all. But we are serving the same cause." Janot cast around and picked up the remnants of a loaf that Etain hadn't finished. She shoved it under her shawl. "That wasn't an explanation," Etain said, and followed her out the door. There were no Gadans to be seen. If this woman was strong in the Force and not a Jedi, she had to know why. "I need to know what you are." "No, you don't." "How do I know you're not someone who has turned to the dark side?" Janot stopped abruptly and spun around, suddenly faster and more upright than an old woman should have been. "I can choose when I am detected and not detected, and given your competence, I'm the one who's most at risk. Now, silence." It wasn't quite the answer Etain was expecting. She felt the same authority as she had in the presence of Folia, except that he exhibited peaks and troughs of the Force, while Janot projected an infinite steadiness. She was certainty the Etain envied certainty. Janot led her into the woodland that skirted Imbrani to the east. She was keeping up a punishing pace, and Etain decided not to ask any more questions for the time being. At various points along the way, Janot deviated. "Mind the Warrens," she said, and Etain's sidestepped holes and depressions that told her colonies of Gedans had been busy beneath the ground. They finally paused half an hour later, having covered an arc that brought them north to the edge of the Brine River. As rivers went, it was more of a large stream. Janet stood still, apparently looking at the water, but not appearing to focus. Then she jerked her head around and stared west, taking a deep breath and exhaling slowly. "Walk upstream," she said. "Follow the river bank and keep your wits about you. Your soldier is there, and he needs those plans." "A soldier? One?" "That's what I said. Come on. He won't be there much longer." "Not a group, then? Not even a few?" "Correct. There are others, but they're a little way from here. Now go." "What makes you think I have plans? If you hadn't, I wouldn't be risking myself to direct you toward your contact," Jinot said. "I have other work to do now. When you find your soldier, I'll try to persuade Berhan to take him in for a while. He'll need somewhere to hide. Get on with it. He won't hang around." Etain watched Jinot start away toward the town. Looking back just once, the Padawan slipped out her lightsaber and tried to get a sense of what might lie west along the riverbank. And when she glanced back again, Jinot was nowhere to be seen. She was aware of the scrabbling of a small, clawed feet around her. Whatever influence had kept the Gedans at bay while Jinot was with her was gone. She kicked out occasionally and hoped her boots were thick enough. If she went back to the farm, nothing would have changed, and she would be no nearer to delivering the information. She had no choice but to go on. The bank was overgrown in places, and she stepped into the river, knowing it would be shallow. The knowledge didn't make it any more pleasant to wade in certain boots, but it was a reliable route, and it kept the Gedans from trying their luck with her. They were wary of Jinot. Etain wondered why the Force didn't deter them from stalking her as well. It was more confirmation, if she ever needed it, that she really wasn't much of a Jedi when it came to utilizing the Force. She had to concentrate. She had to find that single-minded sense of both purpose and acceptance that had so long eluded her. Although Etain had clearly not yet come close to mastering control of the Force, she could see and feel beyond the immediate world. She could feel the nocturnal creatures around her. She even felt the little silver reed eels parting to avoid her before they brushed her boots on the way downstream. Then she became aware of something she wasn't expecting to encounter in the wilds of the Imbrani woods: a child. She could feel a child nearby. There was something unusual about the child, but it was definitely a youngster, and there was a feeling of loss about it. She couldn't imagine any of the townspeople letting a child out at night with Gedans about. Ignore it. This isn't your problem now. But it was a child. It wasn't afraid. It was anxious, but not scared as any sensible child should have been, wandering around alone at night. Suddenly, there was something touching her forehead. She put out her hand instinctively, as if shooing away an insect. But there was nothing there, and still she felt something right between her brows. It dipped briefly to her chest, exactly on her sternum, and back up to her forehead. Then she was suddenly blinded by a light of painful intensity that shot out of the darkness and overwhelmed her. She had nothing to lose. She drew her lightsaber, prepared to die on her feet if nothing else. She didn't need to see her opponent. There was a slight sound. The light snapped off. She could still sense a child right in front of her. "Sorry, ma'am," a man's voice said. "I didn't recognize you." And she still detected only a child, so close that it had to be next to the man. For some reason, she couldn't sense him in the Force at all. Red ghost images of the light still blinded her. She held her lightsaber steady. When her vision cleared, she knew exactly who she was staring at. And she also knew Jannat had betrayed her. She'd probably betrayed Philia too. Etain could see the distinctive full-face Mandalorian helmet of Gez Hokan. The sinister T-shaped slit told her all she needed to know. She raised the lightsaber. Both his hands were resting on his rifle. Perhaps the child, the unseen child, had been a lure, a distraction projected by Jannat. "Ma'am, put the weapon down, ma'am." "Hokan, this is for Master Folia," she hissed and swung at him. Hokan leapt back with astonishing reflexes. She didn't recognize his voice. It was younger, almost accentless. He didn't even raise his rifle. The monster was playing with her. She spun on the ball of her foot and very nearly took his arm off. Sudden rage constricted her throat. She slashed again, but found only air. "Ma'am, please. Don't make me disarm you." "Try it," she said. She beckoned him forward with one hand, lightsaber steady in the other. "You want this? Try me." He launched himself at her, hitting her square in the chest and knocking her backward into the river. The child was still there. Where? How? And then Hokan was on top of her, holding her under the water with one hand, and she dropped the lightsaber. She fought and choked and thought she was going to drown. And she had no idea why she couldn't fight off an ordinary man with both her fists. She should have been able to muster more physical strength than this human. He hauled her up out of the water, one-handed, and dumped her on the riverbank, flat on her back, holding both her arms down. "Ma'am, steady now." But she wasn't finished yet. With an animal grunt, she drove her knee up hard, between his thighs as hard as she could. And when she was frightened and desperate and angry, that was very hard indeed. She hadn't known it until now. Etain gasped as her knee went crack. It hurt, but it didn't seem to hurt him. "Ma'am, with respect, please shut up. You're going to get us both killed." The sinister mask loomed over her. I'm not Hokan. I'm not him. If you just calm down, I'll show you. He loosened his grip slightly, and she almost struggled free. Now Stone was bewildered. Ma'am, stop this, please. I'm going to let go, and you're going to listen to me explain who I am. Her breath was coming in gasps, and she coughed water. The ever-present child so disoriented her that she stopped trying to dislodge him, and let him struggle to his feet. Etain could see him, clearly now. She could see well in the darkness, better than a normal human. She was staring at a huge droid-like creature, clad in pale gray armor plates, with no face and no markings. And it had a blaster rifle. He, held out a hand as if to pull her to her feet. Well, it wasn't Gez Hokan. That was all she could tell. She took his armored hand and got to her feet. What in creation's names are you? She managed to ask. Ma'am, my apologies. I didn't recognize you at first. This is entirely my fault for failing to identify myself correctly. He touched black-gloved fingers briefly to his temple, and she noticed the knuckle plate on the back of the gauntlets. Commando of the Grand Army, CC 1136. Ma'am, I await your orders, General. General? Voices coming from things that appeared to have no lips reminded her too much of droids. He tilted his head slightly. My apologies. I didn't see the braid, Commander. And what's the Grand Army? The Republic's army, ma'am. Sorry. I should have realized that you've been out of contact with Coruscant for a while now, and... Since when did we acquire a Grand Army? About 10 years ago. He gestured to the bushes along the bank. Shall we discuss this somewhere less public? You're presenting something of a target to anyone with a night scope. I think even the local militia can manage one of those between them. I dropped my lightsaber in the river. Let me get it, ma'am, he said. He stepped into the shallow water, and the light on his helmet flicked on. He bent down and fumbled in the illuminated water, then stood up, with the hilt in his hand. Please don't use it on me again, will you? Etain racked her silken hair back from her face, with chilled fingers. She took the lightsaber carefully. I don't think I'd have much luck anyway. Look, why are you calling me Commander? Ma'am, Jedi are all officers now. You are a Jedi, aren't you? Hard to believe, isn't it? No offense, ma'am. I'd ask the same question if I were you, Commander. Commander. I'm Padawan Etain Termukan. Master Casterlier is dead. It seems you're the soldier I have to help. She looked up at him. What's your name? Ma'am. Commando CC. Your name. Your real name. He hesitated. Darman, he said, sounding as if he were embarrassed by it. We need to get out of here. They're looking for me. They won't have much trouble finding you in that outfit, she said sarcastically. The dirt rinsed off. He stood silent for a moment. Do you have orders for me, ma'am? I have to make RV Point Gamma and find the rest of my squad. He was talking army gibberish. When do you have to do that? Now? He paused. Within 12 standard hours. Then we've got time. I have plans to show you. Come back with me and let's work out what we have to do next. She took the lightsaber from him and gestured with both arms. I'll help you carry what I can. It's heavy, ma'am. I'm a Jedi. I might not be a very competent Jedi, but I am physically strong. Even if you did take me down. A bit of training will fix that, ma'am, he said. And he eased off that terrible Mandalorian helmet with a faint pop of its seal. You're a commander. He was a young man, probably in his early 20s, with close-cropped black hair and dark eyes. And despite the hard planes of his face, he had a trusting and innocent expression that was so full of confidence that it surprised her. He wasn't just confident in himself. He exuded confidence in her. You're probably just a bit rusty, ma'am. We'll get you back on form in no time. Are you on form, Darman? He had overpowered her. It wasn't supposed to be like that. How good are you? I'm a commander, ma'am. Bred to be the best. Bred to serve you. He wasn't joking. How old are you, Darman? He didn't even blink. She could see the hard muscles in his neck. There wasn't even a hint of fat on his face. He looked extremely fit indeed, upright, a model soldier. I'm 10 years old, ma'am, Darman said. Droids didn't drink or chase women, and they had no interest in making money on the side. They weren't real warriors, soldiers with pride and honor. But at least Gez Hokan could trust that they wouldn't be found lying in the gutter with an empty bottle the next morning. And they did look truly magnificent when they marched. They were marching now along the wide gravel path that led up to Lick and Ankit's villa. Hokan walked beside them, then behind them, moving positions because he was so fascinated by the absolute precision of their steps and the complete unvarying conformity of their height and profile. They looked like bricks in a perfect wall, a wall that could never be breached. Machines could be made to be identical, and that was good. But it was an anathema to do that to men, especially Mandalorian men. The Umbaran lieutenant raised his arm and brought the droid platoon to a halt 10 meters from the veranda steps. Lick and Ankit was already standing on the top stair, gazing down at them in his fancy headdress and that decutla robe like the weak, decadent grocer he was. Hokan walked forward, helmet under his arm, and nodded politely. Good morning, Hokan, Ankit said. I see you've finally made some friends. I'd like to introduce you to them, Hokan said, because you're going to be seeing a great deal of each other. He turned to the lieutenant. Proceed, Kuven. The Umbaran saluted. Platoon advance. It was all vulgar theatrics, but Hokan had waited a long time for this. It was also necessary. He had to belay some troops near Uthan's facility for rapid deployment. They would be little use in the base 30 kilometers away. Ankit stepped forward as the droids reached the steps. "This is an outrage," he said. "The Trade Federation will not tolerate—" The Namorian stood aside just as the first rank of peered droids reached the intricately inlaid Kuvla door with its marquetry image of entwined vines. Hoken wasn't expecting a display of heroics, and he didn't get one. "It's very good of you to allow me to belay my troops here," he said. "A noble use of all that rested space. The Separatists are grateful for the personal sacrifice you've made to ensure the security of Dr. Uthan's project." And Kit walked down the steps as fast as his showering headdress and long robe would allow. Even by Nemorian's standards of anxiety, he looked terribly upset. He shook. He stood almost a head taller than Hoken, even without the headdress, which was rustling as if some creature had landed in it and was struggling to escape. "I have a contract with Dr. Uthan and her government, and you failed to honor the clause that guaranteed adequate resourcing for security. Dr. Uthan's notice of penalty should be on its way to your office. I do not take kindly to betrayal. That's no way to address a commissioned officer of the Separatist forces. An officer. Field commission," Hoken smiled, because he was genuinely happy. "I have no need of you now, Ankit. Just be grateful you're alive. By the way, Dr. Uthan's government has paid a bonus directly to the Trade Federation to ensure I'm allowed to work unhindered. Enemy troops have landed, and this region is now under martial law." Ankit's slit of a mouth was clamped tight in anger. At least he wasn't pleading for his life. Hoken would have had to kill him if he had begged. He couldn't bear whining. "And I suppose that means you, Hokan," Ankit said. "Major Hokan, please. If you see any of my former employees wandering around, don't shelter them, will you? Some of them have failed to show up to collect their severance payment. I'd like to handle their outplacement packages personally. You're the paradigm of efficient management for us all," Ankit said. Hoken enjoyed the moment of revenge, then put it aside as the distracting bauble that it was. Ankit was no threat now. You couldn't bribe droids. The Ubaran and Aqualish officers now knew what happened to negligent soldiers, because they'd carried out his execution orders. Hoken was careful to ensure that everyone was clear on what happened if they left his employment under a cloud. "And where do I live?" Ankit said. "Oh, plenty of room here," Hoken replied. There was a loud crash, followed by the tinkle of fragile glass hitting a hard floor. "Droids could be so careless. I'm sure you won't get in their way." He touched his fingers to his helmet and strode off. There were still a few of his former troops missing. One was his weak-right Lieutenant Gutanay. He wanted to locate him very badly, as he needed to demonstrate to the new officers that he would happily do his own disciplinary work. It was an image he wanted planted in their heads should Ankit ever attempted to bribe them. He walked down the path to the waiting speeder bike. The farmer had found scraps of circuitry on his land and wanted to know if it was worth a bottle of Urquell to reveal the location. Loken set off to visit him personally, to show that the information was worth more than that. It was worth a farmer's life. RV Point Beta should have been a coppice at the top of a shallow escarpment west of Imbrani. When Nina got within visual range of it, there was no trees to be found. Coordinates are right, or else this visor is up the creek, Etten said, tilting his head one way, then the other. No positions accurate. Confirm no trees, though. Shall I deploy a remote to east? No, Nina said. Let's save them for ordnance. Too conspicuous out here. We'll have to lay up as close as we can, and rely on eyeballing Darman if he shows. Where's the nearest cover? About 1 click east. That'll have to do. Aiton looked back, keeping within the trees and retracing their steps to ensure they weren't being tracked. His armor was now caked with moss, and Nina was glad he wasn't downwind of him. Whatever he'd crawled through smelled authentically rural. Vi and Nina tabbed on, carrying the extra gear between them, an assortment of entry equipment, including 3 dynamic hammers, a hydraulic ram, and a ratchet attachment for the really difficult doors. They had transferred all their explosive ordnance to their backpacks. If they made hard contact and had to drop the load and hurry out, Nina didn't fancy being left with a hydraulic ram and ration packs for self-defense. A pile of grenades was far more useful. Logging, Vi said quietly. What? The mission coppice. It's coming up on autumn. They've been out cutting trees for winter since the Risi was done. That's the problem with intel, Nina said. Goes stale really fast. Not like exercises. No, it's not. This is going to be invaluable for training updates when we get back. Vi sounded as if he had sighed. That was the funny thing about Helmut's comlinks. One got used to listening to every nuance of breath and tone, and even the different ways his brother swallowed. They couldn't see each other's facial expressions, and had to listen for them. It was probably like being blind. Nana had never known any blind people, but he had heard of a batch of clones whose eyesight wasn't 20/20, disappearing after their first exercise. Kaminoans were obsessive about quality control. He might have been bred for selfless obedience, but he wasn't stupid. The Kaminoans' technicians were the only things that truly terrified him, and what he felt when he obeyed their instructions was different than the feelings he had when a Jedi gave him orders. He wondered if Vi and Aitin felt the same way. You don't think we're going to make it, do you, Vi? I'm not afraid to die, not in combat anyway. I didn't say you were. It's just... 10-meter range, son. No Kaminoans listening. It's just so inefficient. You said it yourself. You said it was erased. That was Geonosis. They spend so much time and trouble making us perfect, and then they don't give us what we need to do the job. You remember what Sergeant Cal used to say? He used to swear a lot, I remember that. No. He used to get upset when he'd had a few drinks and say that he could make us better soldiers. If we had time to go out and live, that which experience poor, that's what he used to say. He used to slur the words quite a bit, too, and he didn't like clones. That was all bluster, and you know it. Yes, Kalaskarata said awful things about clones, but it never sounded as if he meant them. Not to the clones, anyway. He got oosh cake from home. No easy feat on secret, sealed Commando, and shared it with the Commando squads. He was responsible for training. He called them his dead men, his wet droids, all kinds of abusive things. But if you caught him off duty in his cabin, he would sometimes fight back tears and make you eat some delicacy smuggled in for him, or encourage you to read one of his illicit texts that wasn't on the accelerated training's curriculum. They were often stories of soldiers who could have done many other things, but chose to fight. Sergeant Cal was especially eager for his wit droids to read stuff about a culture called Mandalorian. He admired Jango Fett. This is who you really are, he'd say. Be proud however much these ugly grey freaks treat you like cattle. No, he didn't like the Kaminoans much. Did Kalskarata. Once he signed up the Kaminoans, he said, they never let him go home again. But he told Nina that he didn't want to. He couldn't leave his boys now. Not since he knew. Brief, he said, gesturing with a glass of colorless alcohol, is never glorious. Nina was determined to work out what Kalskarata had come to understand, and why it upset him so much. Nobody has all the answers, Nina said. The trouble with getting used to being powerful is that you can forget the small details that'll bring you down. Vi made that F sound as if he was about to start laughing. I know who you're quoting. Nina didn't even realize he'd said it. It was Sergeant Cal's all right. He'd even started using the word son. He missed him. Then the comlink warning light in his HUD interrupted his thoughts. Medium range. What was Atin? Contact. 500 meters. Dead on your 6. Atin's voice cut through. Droids. 10. 1 humanoid. Confirm 10 tinnies. 1 wet. Looks like an officer. There was a loud blast behind them. Correction. Hard contact. Nana knew this by rote, and Phi didn't even exchange words with him. They dropped the gear and darted back the way they had come, rifles up, safeties off. And when they got within 50 meters of Atin's location, they dropped into the prone positions to aim. Atin was pinned down at the foot of a tree. There was one droid slumped on its side, with wisps of smoke rising from it. But the others were formed up, lying down, covering fire while two advanced in short sprints. Zigzagging, Atin was managing to get off the occasional shot. If they'd wanted him dead, they probably had the blaster power to do it. They wanted Atin alive. "I can see the rat," Fice said. He was to Nina's left, staring down the sniper scope. "Aqualish, Captain, in fact." "Okay, take him when you're ready." Nina snapped on his grenade launcher and aimed at the line of droids. They were spread, maybe 40 meters end to end. It may take 2 rounds to knock them out, if they didn't scatter. Droids were great on battlefields, but they weren't made for smart stuff. And if their officers was down, crack. The air expanded instantly, with a release of heat and energy. That was what gave plasma bolts their satisfying sound. The Aqualish fell backward, chest plates shattered and lumps that looked like clods of wet soil, but one flew from him and dropped. The droid stopped for a fraction of a second, then carried on their course as if that was the best idea they had. Vice scrambled away from his positions and rolled. No, they really weren't good at close quarters combat, at least not without direction from a ret. But there were always a lot of them, and they could return fire as well as any organic life form. 3 of the 7 remaining droids turned their attention to the directions of Fi's bolts. The bushes where Fi had been firing exploded in flame. Nina perceived that it was all happening slowly, at heartbeat pace, but it wasn't, not at all. He aimed and fired, once, twice. The twin explosions almost merged into one. Soil and grass and metal fragments rained down around him. At close range, droids were almost as dangerous when you hit them as when they hit you. They were their own shrapnel. The firing stopped. Smoke drifted from at least 5 impact points. Nina could see nothing moving. "One tiny intact but immobile," Fi said. "Got it," Nina said. He fired again, just in case. "Looks sorted out there," Fi said. He lowered his rifle. "Atin, you okay?" "Nothing missing that I can't bolt back on." "You're a laugh a minute," Nina said, and started to ease up on one arm. It was amazing how he could forget the weight of his pack for the few moments it took to save his life. Now, how did they... "Down," Atin yelled. A bolt flew a meter above Nina's head, and he dropped back on his belly. It sounded like 2 shots. Then there was silence. "Now it's sorted," Atin said. "Someone help me get up, please." When Nina managed to get into a kneeling position, he could see a thoroughly shattered pile of droids, a bit closer to him than the line. It had been 2 shots he'd heard. One had been aimed at him, and one had come from Atin to make sure there wasn't a second. "Coming, brother," Nina said. Atin's mud-smeared chest plate was a different color now, matte black with streaks radiating from the center. I can't breathe properly, he said, utterly matter of fact, in the way badly injured men often were. He gulped in a breath. My chest hurts. Fi propped him up against the trunk of a tree and took his helmet off. There was no blood coming from his mouth. He was bone right, and his wall scar looked dramatic. But he wasn't bleeding out. His pupils looked okay. He wasn't in shock. Fi released the gription on his chest plate and eased the arm off. The bodysuit was intact. Sure, it's just your chest, Fi asked. You didn't have a tally scan to check Aten's status. You didn't start removing armor or embedded objects until you knew what you were dealing with. Sometimes that was all that was holding a man together. Aten nodded. Fi peeled away the sections of suit, starting at the collar. "For," Fi said. "That's going to be a monster of a bruise." There was a livid patch from his sternum to halfway down his chest. "You collecting distinguishing features or something?" "Hit me square on," Aten said, panting. "Not a regular round. Armor works, though, eh?" Fi took his helmet off and listened to Aten's breathing, with his ear pressed to his chest. "Ow. Shut up and breathe." Aten took shallow breaths, wincing. Fi straightened up and nodded. "Can't hear any pneumothorax," he said. "But let's keep an eye on him. The air trapped inside can build up. Might be a fractured ribs. Might just be a bad bruise." He took out a canister of Bacta and sprayed the rapidly developing bruise. Aten lifted his arms slightly, as if testing them. Fi sealed the bodysuit and armor back in place. "I'll take your pack," Nina said, and unclipped it. It was the least he could do. "I think we can skip RV Beta now. Let's leave some souvenirs around there so Daman can spot them if he shows up. You never know if more tinnies will follow. They're not original thinkers. They probably had a few minutes, even if any of the droids had managed to call into base." Fi sprinted off through the trees with a few pieces of debris to leave them at the RV point. Nina searched the remains of the Aqualish officer and took everything that looked like a key, a data medium, or proof of ID. Then he dragged Aten's pack behind him on a webbing strap, heading for the place they'd left the entry equipment. It was going to be a tough slog to RV Gamma, at least until Aten could carry his pack again. The whole engagement had lasted 5 minutes and 8 seconds. First shot to last, including running time. He had no idea if it had been 1 second or half an hour. Funny thing, time perception's under fire. Nina's boots crunched over droid shrapnel, and he wondered how long a firefight felt to a droid. "Is that how they see us?" Nina asked. "Ordinary people. That is, like droids." "No," Aten said. "We don't have any scrap value." He laughed and stopped short with a small gasp. It must have hurt him. "I'm going to slow you down. Don't go gallant on me. You're coming the rest of the way, because I'm not lugging all that gear around with Fi. I want a break sometime." Okay, and thanks. I owe you. No, you don't. Thanks anyway. Want to explain why you've been Darman? Tin was holding his rifle carefully. Her hands spun clear of his chest. I've been the last man left standing in 2 squads now. Oh. Silence. Nina prompted. Want to tell me how? First squad tried to rescue me on a live range exercise. I didn't need rescuing. Not that badly anyway. Ah, Nina felt instantly appalled at himself for thinking Atten didn't care what happened to Darman. He was just caring too much. My training sergeant said there was something called survivor's guilt. He also said that in those cases, having you survive was what your squad wanted. They bred a lot of stuff out of us. Why not do that as well? Nana stopped dragging Atten's pack and slung his rifle over his shoulder. He lifted the pack and was glad to carry it. If they had, I might not be here now, he said, and knew Darman would be waiting for them tomorrow. Gestoken surveyed the scrap heap that had been a functioning droid platoon a few hours earlier. Whatever had hit them had hit fast and hard, and judging by the precisely placed sniper shot and the blast pattern of only 2 grenades, they had been taken out by experts. It might have been 1 man or it might have been a platoon. You typically couldn't ambush battle droids like that with a handful of men. But that depends entirely on who the men were. It was a shame that the captain hadn't called back with a sitrep and instructed. If he hadn't been killed, Hoken would have had him shot for disobeying operational procedures. He studied the droid escort lined up neatly by the speeder bikes and wondered if they felt anything when they saw dismantled comrades. There's no sign of a camp, sir. Lieutenant Kuven came jogging back from the woods opposite the clearing. It was curious to see the unbalanced, deathly paler tinged pink by the exertion. Some broken branches at knee height, and crushed grass from troops firing prone. But I honestly can't tell how many men we are dealing with. You can't tell much, can you, Lieutenant? Hoken said. Sir, I'll check again. He was right-faced now. Right even for an Ubaran. Sir, Second Lieutenant. Harati was enthusiastic, no doubt keen to be elevated to Coven's rank. He sprinted to his commander, an attitude Hoken appreciated. I found the most extraordinary thing. I'm glad one of you has found something. What is it? A pile of droid parts, sir. And this is extraordinary because... No, sir. There's some way from here, and they're sort of arranged, sir. Hoken strode off for the speeder. Show me. The trees had been cut down a few days earlier because there was already cloth fungus growing on them in a pale pink mesh. One broad stump, the flattest one, almost like an altar, supported the remains of a droid. The torn pieces of its trunk were laid flat. The arms were neatly arranged on one side, of the thorax and the legs on the other. Part of their faceplate was propped up as if looking skyward. That's how the droid pilot was left, too, sir. Harati was a good man. He'd obviously studied the report the militia had filed. However appallingly inadequate its presentation had been. I think it's a sign. It was a long way to move a dead droid from a battle. There were no drag marks leading to the stump. It was a heavy load to carry on foot. They might even have a transport, although he could see no signs that a repulsor lift had passed over the ground. Hoken stared at the ritually arranged debris and tried to think who would want to send the Separatists a message and what it might mean. It's a trophy, Hoken said. They are taunting us. They are showing how easy this is for them. That made him angry. He was Mandalorian. Being an easy enemy wasn't his way. A curfew, Harati. Declare a permanent curfew on all powered vehicles until further notice. Anything moving under power is either ours or the enemy. We can track all friendly transports. He paused. You have made sure all our vehicles have their own transponders, haven't you? Yes, sir. Why the delay then? It's harvest, sir. How will the farmers get their produce to Teklet for shipping? I imagine they have handcarts, Hoken said. He swung his leg over the speeder's saddle, and Kit would have to find an alternative means of conveyance for his crops. Hoken pondered on the carefully arranged droid debris all the way back to his new headquarters in Aket's villa. He felt that moving into that vulgar hut bordello of a house would make him soft and decadent, too. So he set up his office in an outbuilding. He didn't care for fancy drapery and useless ornaments. It just happened to be convenient for the research facility and close to his troops. So, who had the Republic sent to target Uthan's project? They were clearly bold men. First they made sport of an aerial patrol, now a droid platoon and its captain. They seemed to be choosing their targets casually. The clone army must have been terribly important to the Republic's strategy for these troops to land like this. Where were the conventional armies? Where were the Jedi generals? When would they come? This was a new kind of war. He could feel it. He hated not knowing who was out there, preparing to fight him. If he hadn't known the man was dead, he would have sworn it was Jango Fett himself. 8. You know what makes you especially effective. It's not just that you're genetically superior and intensively trained. And it's not just because you obey orders without question. It's because you're all prepared to shoot to kill, every time. Only 1% of civilians are prepared to kill, and less than a quarter of ordinary human soldiers, even under fire. Sergeant Calcicarata, from his opening lecture to commandos on military psychology. The droid fired a volley of bolts at the steel alloy doors until they glowed red. And still nothing happened. Stop. The droid appeared not to hear. Dr. Overlord Quail Uthan ran down the flight of steps, red and black strands of hair streaming out behind her. She was wearing a voluminous dark blue nightgown. It looked as expensive as her day wear. Hoken saluted her politely and went on watching the droid's progress. "Have you gone mad?" Uthan whispered fiercely. She didn't strike Hoken as the sort of woman who would need to raise her voice to make a point. "There's a biohazard behind that door." "I know," Hoken said. "Just testing. It's all holding up well indeed. Excellent safety bulkheads." Uthan took a discreet but deep breath and glanced briefly at the backs of her hands. "This facility has been built and tested to the highest containment standards, Major. You needn't worry." "But I do, Doctor." He watched the droid patiently, racing bolt after bolt on the door for a while. It paused to swap power packs. "Stop." It stopped. Hoken took out the lightsaber he had taken from Cast Folier and ran its pure blue light down the seam between the two doors. Smoke curled up from the surface, but no breach appeared. It would take even a Jedi a long time to cut through this plating. "Forgive my insistence, but could this not wait until the morning?" Uthan asked. "I'm working around the chrono as it is to weaponize this agent. I even sleep here. I would prefer to be doing that right now. My apologies, Doctor. But we might not have the luxury of time." "What's time got to do with it?" "I think I need to relocate you." Uthan had a way of lowering her head slightly, then straightening up as if she were a crate dragon. It was most impressive. "This is a high-risk biohazard facility. It can't be relocated like some tent. I appreciate the inconvenience involved. I still believe it would be safer if you were to pack up your materials and staff and move elsewhere." "Why? You haven't the security situation under control?" "I have it more under control than I did, that's true. But enemy troops have landed. I don't know their numbers, and I don't know what materiel and armaments they have at their disposal. All I think I know, is that this is what they've come for. This is a fortress. You have 100 droids at your disposal. Let them come. You can repel them. All fortresses can be breached in time. I could give you a list of circumstances under which someone who's very resourceful could get past these doors. But I want you to trust my judgment and accept what I say. Let's move you and your work to somewhere less obvious until I have a more accurate assessment of the threat." Uthan looked completely impassive, staring slightly past Hokan, as if she was calculating something. "I can remove the biomaterials and my staff," she said at last. "The equipment can be replaced if needed. I won't be able to continue working without a safe laboratory environment, of course. But if you believe the project is at risk, then idle time is a better option than wasting 3 months' work." What a splendidly sensible woman she was. Almost Mandalorian in her discipline and dedication. Hokan ushered the droid out, How long? He asked. 6 hours, perhaps. Is this material that dangerous? She tilted her head slightly. Only if you're a clone. If you're not, it might simply make you unwell. It must be strange to fight with weapons you can't see. War is about technology, she said. Hawkins smiled politely and walked back out into the courtyard to stand in the dim light from the doorway. There was the first hint of chill on the night air. Winter was coming, and the landscape would be much easier to patrol when the leaves had fallen. When the snows came, it would be even easier. But he suspected that this conflict was going to be a rapid one. Intelligence reports were starting to come in that the Republic was now fighting on hundreds of different fronts. Hundreds. Their new army would have to be millions strong to achieve that dispersal. So they were all clones, sad travesties of the great Jango Fett. Well, he knew one thing. The Republic wouldn't be sending clones to deal with this particular problem. They had to know the Separatists already had the one weapon that could stop them in their tracks. And this kind of operation was beyond the capacity of the docile infantry clones Uthan had described. This was not a game of numbers. Hoken replaced his helmet and started visualizing the research facility as a trap. So they wanted to come and take a look, did they? He'd make them welcome. Droids form up, 2 rings across this entrance. The droids moved as one, even in the darkness, and Hokan again admired their position. Now they were a road sign pointing the way to the target, confirming what the Republic thought it knew. But they'd be wrong. They'd be sending their best men to a decoy. War is about technology. No, Hokan said aloud. The droid snapped to attention. War isn't even about firepower. He tapped his temple. It's about applying your brains. Then he touched his chest. And it's about courage. He didn't expect the droids to understand that. Clones probably didn't understand it either. The straw stank of something awful, but Darman was too exhausted to care. It looked like it might be soft enough to sink into. That was good enough for him. But first he walked around the walls of the barn and checked for an exit if he needed one in an emergency. There were several loose boards in one wall that would do fine. The rickety building looked as if he could actually punch an escape hole through any fragile plank he chooses. Reassured, he dropped everything he was carrying and tried to sit on the bales. But it turned into more of an uncontrolled slump. He didn't even take his helmet off. He sat back and let out a breath. The Padawan commander leaned over him. Are you all right, Darman? She held her hand out, palm down over him, as if she was going to touch him but didn't. I'm fit to fight, Commander. He started to sit up, and she held her hand in a slightly different gesture. That clearly meant stay where you are. I didn't ask that, she said. I can feel you're in some distress. Tell me. It was an order. It came from a Jedi. I injured my leg. when I landed. Apart from that, I'm just tired and a bit hungry. Bit hungry? He was ravenous. Nothing at all, Commander. Landed. I free fell from a vessel. With all that equipment, yes, ma'am. You astounded me. He couldn't tell if that was good or bad. Two things, though. Please don't call me Padawan or Commander. I don't want to be recognized as a Jedi. And I'd rather be called Etain than ma'am. She paused, no doubt thinking of some other failure on his part. And please take your helmet off. It's rather disturbing. So far, Darman had met 3 Jedi, and they all seemed to find him distracting in some way, with or without his helmet. All his life he had been taught that he and his brothers were created for the Jedi, to help them fight their enemies. He'd expected some recognition of that bond, or at least an expression of satisfaction. He removed his helmet and sat feeling confused, torn between the absolute clarity of his military expertise and the confusion of dealing with the civilian world he had been thrust into for the first time. The Padawan. No, Etain. She'd made her orders clear, took a small sphere out of her cloak, and opened it in both hands. Layer after layer of holographic images spilled out of it, stacking neatly like plates. Plans, she said. Her voice had changed completely. She radiated relief. Plans of all the Separatist and Nemorian buildings in this region. Floor plans, utility layouts, wiring diagrams, drainage ducts, specifics on materials used, every detail of how the contractors built them. This is what you need, isn't it? What you are looking for. Darman wasn't tired anymore. He reached out and broke the beam of the projections, flipping a plan vertically so he could read it. He looked through them all and heard himself let out an involuntary breath. Etain was right. It was nearly every bit of intelligence they needed apart from more fluid details such as personnel numbers and routines. With these plans, they knew how to cut power to the buildings, where to insert nerve agents into air ducts or water supplies, and exactly what they would see and where they would have to go when they gained entry. The plan showed the constructions of walls, doors, bulkheads, and windows, so they knew precisely what size of charge or type of ram would be needed to breach them. This was a set of clear instructions for achieving their objective. But Etain didn't seem to know that objective. "What are you going to do with this?" she asked. "We've come to abduct Orvolot Kral Uthan and destroy her research facility," Darman said. "She's developing a nanovirus intended to kill clones." Etain leaned closer. "Clones? I'm a clone. The whole Grand Army is composed of clones. Millions of us, all commanded by Jedi generals." Her face was a study in a blank surprise. It was also fascinating in a way he couldn't define. He had never seen a human female this close, this real. He was astonished by the dappling of small brown dots across the bridge of her nose and her cheeks, and the different strands of colors in her long unkempt hair. Light browns, golds, even reds, and she was as thin as the locals. He could see blue veins in the backs of her hands, and she smelled different from anyone he'd ever shared space with. He wasn't sure if she was pretty or downright ugly. He just knew she was utterly alien and utterly fascinating, as alien as a Gadan or a Golanin. It was almost stopping him from concentrating on the job. "All like you?" she said, at last, blinking rapidly. She seemed unsettled by his scrutiny. "What have I said?" "No, ma'am. Sorry, Etain. I'm a commando. We are trained differently. Some people say that we're eccentric. I realize you haven't received much by way of intelligence. All I knew, all my master would tell me, was that Uthan was here and that the plans were critical to the Republic's safety. Clones didn't come into the conversation." She was staring at him just as Jusik had. There's an old woman who told me you were coming, but she didn't tell me much else." "How many of there are you on Quilara now?" "4. "4? You said there were millions of you. What use is 4 going to be? We're commandos, special forces. You understand that term? Obviously not. How are 4 10-year-olds going to storm Uthan's complex?" It took him a few moments to realize she was being sarcastic. "We fight differently." "You're going to have to be very different indeed, Daman." She looked absolutely crushed, as if he'd let her down, simply by showing up. "Are you really 10 years old?" "Yes, our growth is accelerated." "How can we possibly train competent soldiers in that time?" "It's very intensive training." He was finding it hard not to say "ma'am" each time. "They created us from the best genetic stock, from Jango Fett." Etain raised her eyebrows, but said nothing else. Then she stood up, reached for a basket balanced on a low beam, and handed it to him. It was full of odd round items that smelled edible. But he thought he'd check anyways. "Is this food?" "Yes. The local bread and some sort of steamed cake. Nothing exciting, but it'll fill you up." Daman bit into a lump that yielded slightly in his fingers. It was glorious. It was strongly flavored and chewy, and among the most satisfying meals he had ever eaten. Not quite on the scale of oosh cake, but so far from the odorless, tasteless, textureless field rations that it might well have been. Etain watched him carefully. "You must be starving. It's wonderful." "That doesn't say much for army food." Daman reached into his belt and pulled out a dry ration cube. "Try this." She sniffed it and bit into it. The expression of vague disbelief on her face changed slowly into one of revulsion. "It's appalling. There's nothing in it. It's the perfect nutritional profile for our requirements. It has no smell, so the enemy can't detect it, and no fiber, so we extract minimal race products that would be that would enable us to be tracked, and I get the idea. Is that how they treat you? Like farm animals? We don't go hungry. What do you like doing? He really didn't know what answer she was after. I'm a good shot. I like the DC-17. I meant in your free time. Do you get free time? We study. No family, of course, she said. Yes, I've got squad brothers. I meant, she checked herself. Now I understand. She pushed the basket of bread closer to him. My life hasn't been that much different from yours, except the food was better. Go on, you can finish the whole lot if you want. And he did. He tried not to watch while Etienne wrung water from her robe and shook out her boots. She made him feel uncomfortable, but he didn't know why. Apart from the fact that she wasn't quite the Jedi commander he had been so thoroughly trained to expect. The only females he could recall were Kaminoan's medical technicians, whose quietly impersonal tones intimidated him more than a yelling drill sergeant. And his platoon had once experienced in a pleasantly memorable lecture in encryption techniques from a female Sulstan. He feared females. Now he feared his Jedi officer and was also agitated by her in a way that he didn't even have a word for. It didn't feel acceptable. We need to move on, he said. I have to make the RV point. I've been out of comm contact with my squad for nearly 2 days, and I don't even know if they're alive. This gets worse by the second, she said wearily. First we have 4. Now we might be down to 1. 2, unless you have other duties. You've seen me fight. You're a Jedi commander. That's a title, not an assessment of my ability. I'm not exactly the best of the best. You must be. I know what Jedi can do. Nobody can defeat you as long as you have the Force. She gave him a very odd smile and picked up the hollershot sphere. She seemed to be struggling to find her thread again. She swallowed a few times. Show me where your RV point is. That's right, isn't it? RV? Show me where it is on this chart. Duman took out his datapad and linked his missions charts with the image projected from the sphere. He pointed to the coordinates. It's here, he said. Before we set out on exercises or missions, we agree where we'll meet up. If anything goes wrong, we have to bail out when our transport crashed. So we're scattered. And the procedure is that we go to an RV point for a set time window. He zoomed in on the area northwest of Imbrani. Etienne tilted her head to follow. What's this? She asked. Primary target, Uthan's facility. No, it's not, Intel said. No, that's the Separatist base, the garrison. Her eyes darted back and forth, scanning the chart. She pointed. This group of buildings is the facility. You can see, look. She superimposed the floor plans of the facility with the layout of the farm buildings and shrank the image to fit. They lined up perfectly. Duman's stomach nodded. My squad will be heading for the Separatists then. We'd better make sure we intercept them, Etienne said. or they'd run smack bang into 100 droids. Daman was suddenly on his feet in one move, even before he realized that he'd heard someone coming. "I don't think so," a woman's voice said, "because the droids are all heading for Imbrani." Daman's sidearm was out of his belt and aimed before Etain could even turn her head.